you all for standing by. At this time, all participants will be on a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's call. At that time, you can press star 1 to ask a question from the phone lines. I'd also like to inform parties that the call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. And I'd now like to turn the call over to Ms. Rachel Butler. Thank you, ma'am. You may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Butler, and I am an analyst in the Economic Indicators Division of the Census Bureau. Today, I am going to talk to you about the Small Business Pulse Survey, a new experimental data product of the Census Bureau. In this presentation, I will provide an overview of the Small Business Pulse Survey, touching on its background, questionnaire topics, and methodology. Then, I will provide a live demonstration of the interactive data visualization, concluding with a Q&A session. First, some background information on the Small Business Pulse Survey and its goals. Filling a need for timely economic data, the Small Business Pulse Survey was created to measure the effect of the coronavirus pandemic on U.S. small businesses. Data is collected to provide high-frequency, timely information to policymakers and business owners, as well as researchers and the press. The Small Business Pulse Survey was originally only planned for 9 weeks, from April to June. However, a second phase is now underway to collect additional information through October. The questionnaire was developed with feedback from other government agencies and stakeholders, including the Small Business Administration and Federal Reserve. The first phase of the Small Business Pulse Survey included questions on overall small business well-being, changes in operation and revenue, new challenges, as well as future expectations and outlook. Questionnaire content was modified in the second phase of the survey, released in August, to reflect changing economic conditions. New questions include rehiring laid off or furloughed employees, pivoting to working from home, the use of online platforms to offer goods or services, and changes in capacity of the businesses. Now, I will go over how the survey is conducted. The Small Business Pulse Survey is an experimental data product, meaning that it was created using new data sources and methodologies. Existing census data infrastructure and technology has allowed us to reach small businesses quickly during the pandemic. The survey targets single-location employer small businesses with at least $1,000 in reported annual revenue. During phase 1 million businesses were split across a 9-week rotation to reduce respondent burden. Because the census was able to link to existing business data, we were able to omit questions on business characteristics such as size, industry, etc., further reducing respondent burden. The Small Business Pulse Survey is the first economic survey at Census to be conducted entirely through email. Census was able to leverage Centurion, its in-house internet collection instrument, to conduct the survey. Weekly emails are sent to businesses on Sundays, and follow-up reminders are sent on Wednesdays. In the first phase of the survey, there was typically a bump in response midweek after the follow-up email. Overall, voluntary response rate has been high at around 25%. The conversion rate, which is the response rate divided by the email opening rate, is around 35%. Data are released weekly on Thursdays at 10 a.m. The Small Business Pulse survey data are available at the U.S., state, and metropolitan statistical area level, as well as by NAICS, or North American Industry Classification System code. A NAICS sector is represented by a 2-digit code. For example, the retail industry is classified by NAICS 44 and 45. Users can access the data through an interactive visualization or in downloadable files. Data from the Small Business Pulse Survey are also featured in the Census COVID-19 Data Hub. The COVID-19 Data Hub, developed in collaboration with Esri, presents selected Census Bureau demographic and economic data to help guide decision-making during the coronavirus pandemic. Next, I will provide a walkthrough of the Small Business Pulse Survey website and provide a demo of the visualization. Now I will navigate through the Small Business Pulse Survey website. The Data tab contains an interactive visualization that allows users to visualize the Small Business Pulse Survey data. Navigating to the Weekly Comparisons tab, this provides time series data of the responses over time from the beginning of Phase 1 in April to present in Phase 2. In the download section, users can download the raw response data in multiple files. So first, on Select Date Range, users can select what time period they are interested in for the survey. And then users can filter by what kind of data they're interested in. So the default is a national tag, which provides all the data at the national level. Or you can apply filters by sector, state, MSA, or employment size. And if users want to download all the data at once, they simply apply the all tag and then can download a zip of all files. To the right, under General Info and Documentation, users can download the full survey questionnaire to see the detailed questions and response options in both Phase 1 and Phase 2. Users can also download code books, which will help them decode the data in the downloadable files. The data dictionary provides an overview of the various variables in the file and what they mean. And then finally, the README file provides additional information about the data. On the About the Data tab, users can learn more about the Small Business Pulse Survey, what the businesses are contained in the population, as well as the questionnaire content. And then users can learn more about the survey methodology on the How the Data are Collected tab. For more information about the survey, users can read through the FAQs, or if a question is not covered in the FAQs, they can contact Small Business Pulse staff at econ.pulse.data@census.gov. Now, I will dive into a live demo of the interactive data visualization. The first section of the visualization provides an overview of responses by geography and NAICS sector. This allows users, provides users with a high-level overview of survey responses across states and industries. On the map, to select the data you want to view on the map and bar chart, users can filter by collection date, with the default being the most recent week. Then they can select a survey question. Notice how the full question is not listed in the dropdown. This is simply to conserve space, and when a user selects the question, the full question will be written above the visualization. And then finally, the last filter allows users to pick the survey answer. So this question reads, overall, how has this business been affected by the coronavirus pandemic? Then users can look at response percentages for those businesses who responded. They experienced a large negative effect, a moderate negative effect, little or no effect, a moderate positive effect, or a large positive effect. So first, let's look at the percentage of businesses who reported experiencing a large negative effect. So the legend is defined in relation to the national average. So the percentage of businesses who respond experiencing a high negative or a large negative effect. The national average is 33%. States that are the same or around the same as the national average appear white, whereas states who have a higher percentage than the national average are red. And conversely, states lower than the national average appear blue. The map allows users to see interesting regional trends. For instance, the map shows that businesses located in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, more businesses reported experiencing a large negative effect compared to businesses located in the South and Midwest. And then the graph to the right allows users to see a similar breakout by make sector. The horizontal red line again shows the national average of 33% of businesses reporting experiencing a large negative effect. And then just from looking at this bar, users can see that not all businesses experience the pandemic in the same way. For instance, businesses in the arts, entertainment, and recreation industry, as well as accommodation and food services, more businesses reported experiencing a large negative effect compared to businesses in the construction industry, as well as utilities industry. And then if we change the response to a little or no effect, we see the inverse of what we just saw, whereas more businesses in utility reported experiencing little to no effect compared to healthcare, arts, entertainment, and recreation, and food and accommodation services. The second section of visualization, the survey response detail section, provides a more detailed breakout of the data in the first section. Users can view the response data broken out by states, NAICS industries, or metropolitan statistical areas. And this visualization allows users to use an additional feature where users can compare the responses among states. First, users need to select whether they want to look at state, NAICS, or MSA. Let's start with state. And then on the drop-down, users can select up to 5 states that they want to view the results of. So for this example, let's select the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. And this allows users to explore regional trends by looking at states that are in close geographic proximity. So DC, Virginia, and Maryland are all states that are near one another, but small businesses appear to have been affected by the pandemic differently. If we look at the percentage of businesses that experienced large negative effects, DC, represented by the red bar, has reported the highest number of businesses reporting a large negative effect. Whereas both Maryland and Virginia are closer to the national average, represented by the blue bar. Conversely, if we look at the moderate negative effect response, Maryland and DC are much closer to the national average compared to Virginia, where fewer businesses report experiencing a moderate negative effect. And then across the board, only about 5% of businesses reported experiencing a moderate positive effect or a large positive effect. Now, let's look at the data by industry. Under the Compare dropdown, we will select NAICS. And then for this example, let's select 4 industries. We will select retail, food and accommodation, entertainment, and construction. So the first graph shows the percentage of businesses in each industry that report a large negative effect. Both Sector 71, which is arts, entertainment, and recreation, and Sector 72, which is the blue bar for accommodation and food services, are much higher than the national average, meaning that a higher proportion of businesses reported experiencing a large negative effect compared to all industries. Similarly, the retail industry, which is represented by the green bar, and then construction are much lower than the national average, meaning that fewer businesses experienced a large negative effect. And then looking at the percentage of businesses who experienced a moderate negative effect, construction and retail were much higher than both entertainment and accommodation and food services. But the comparison tool allows users to really customize the data that they want to see in comparing states, industries, and metropolitan statistical areas. Finally, the multi-response comparison section is a scatter plot that allows users to look at the responses between 2 survey questions at once and allows users to see how they might be related. And then users can make comparisons by state, MSA, and sector. So in this example, we will look at the comparison of businesses who experienced a large negative effect in the coronavirus, and then their expectations, which is defined as, in the questionnaire, how long the business thinks it will take to return the same level of operations as a year prior. So the horizontal bar shows the national average of the percentages of businesses who expect it will take more than 6 months to return to normal operations. And the vertical red line shows the national average 33% of those businesses that experienced a large negative effect. So in this example, there appears to be a positive relationship between the two questions, meaning that MSAs with a high percentage of businesses reporting a large overall negative effect also had a higher percentage of businesses reporting that will take at least 6 months to return to normal operations. And you can see some large MSAs in this upper right quadrant, such as New York City, San Francisco, Boston, and Philadelphia. Conversely, if we switch things up a little bit and look at the businesses who experienced little or no effect, we see a negative relationship, meaning that the businesses who MSAs with a lower percentage of businesses reporting a large overall negative effect also had a lower percentage of businesses reporting that will take at least 6 months to return to normal operations. Finally, the last section, the weekly comparison section, allows users to see how survey responses have changed over time between the beginning of phase 1 and phase 2. The default view is the overall effect question. Overall, how has this business been affected by the coronavirus pandemic? And the default is the national. So please note that there is a gap between June and August, which represents the break between the end of phase 1 and the beginning of phase 2. The dark blue line shows the percentage of businesses that experienced a large negative effect. The red line shows businesses that experienced a moderate negative effect. The green line shows the response little or no effect, and then yellow and blue are moderate positive effects and large positive effects, respectively. So we see that the businesses that reported a moderate and large positive effect have remained largely constant and low over time. The other big trend that we see is a decrease over time in the percentage of businesses that report a large negative effect. Similarly, we see a slight increase in the number of businesses that report a moderate negative effect. So over time, this suggests that conditions may be improving for small businesses. Let's filter by state and look at the results for New York, a state who had a lot of coronavirus cases at the beginning of the pandemic, and see how things have changed in New York over time compared to the national average. So we see that similar to the national average, even though that there has been a larger proportion of businesses reporting a large negative effect, this proportion has decreased over time, similar to the national average, while there's been a slight uptick in the percentage of businesses reporting a moderate negative effect. So this concludes our demonstration today. Now for future plans for the Small Business Pulse Survey. One of the greatest additional benefits of the Pulse Survey is the potential to leverage the rapid response technology in the future. The success of the Small Business Pulse Survey is evidence that these methods work and can be employed in the future as needed during rapidly changing social or economic conditions. The Small Business Pulse Survey is not just helpful for business owners and policymakers. The data has been covered by well-known national news organizations, including the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg. Finally, here are some useful links that users can use to access the data. So users can access the main data through census.gov, the experimental data product page, and then navigate there to access the data. And then finally, if users have any questions, they can always contact the Econ Survey Small Business Pulse Survey staff at econ.pulse@census.gov. And then users can also read through the respondent FAQ page. So this concludes today's presentation on the Small Business Pulse Survey. Thank you for listening, and the operator will now take questions over the phone.
Thank you. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star 1. You will be prompted to unmute your phone and record your name. Please record your name so that I may introduce you for your question. Once again, it is star 1 to ask a question. One moment as we wait for questions. We do have several questions that have come in. Our first one comes from Carl Ramirez. Your line is now open.
Hi, yeah, thanks for taking this. Hey, it's more of a methodology question. It's probably on the respondents page or the methodology page. But I'm wondering, so the sample was drawn from the existing sample frame you use for other EC or economic program surveys like the economic census. So who are the actual respondents that get this email or letter? You know, are they the same reporters for the economic census? I guess my question is, are they the appropriate respondents to answer this question for that business?
That is a really interesting question. Kathy, would you mind jumping in?
Sure. No, I agree. It is an interesting question. And so when we conduct the economic census, the person filling out the form leaves their contact information, so their name, their mailing address, their phone number, and their email address. And so those are the email addresses that the Small Business Pulse Survey is mailed to. So insofar as that person was appropriate to report for the economic census, they're appropriate for the Business Pulse. Does that answer your question? It's kind of a non-answer, but
No, that.
Right. I was going to say, you're right that there may be, staffing changes perhaps, or that sort of thing where the email address is no longer valid or bounces, and we do kind of control for those by adjusting our survey weights.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I figure, since this is really sort of high-level policy kind of question, those reporters to the economic census are probably the best ones anyway. I was just curious whether there was some targeting of respondents, like this thing should be filled out by the person who knows the most about X. But it sounds right to me, yeah. Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Our next question comes from Magna Olson. Your line is now open.
Hi, my question is about the sample size. What's the sample size for the U.S.? And I don't know, you can provide a sample size for individual states. I'm interested in Minnesota.
This is Kathy again. Hi, thank you for your question. So the Small Business Pulse Survey has nearly 1 million firms that are surveyed across 9 weeks. So that's just under 100,000 firms every week for the 9-week rotation. We do produce in the downloads section a file that is called URR, which gives the response rates by state. And that would give you an indication if you were interested in a particular geography. say, Maryland where we are, or California or Texas or something like that, you could get a sense of the size of the sample that reported for each of those geographic subnational areas.
Thank you. Once again, it is star one to ask a question, and please do ask one question without a follow-up to allow time for our remaining questions. Next, we have Candy Slocum. Your line is now open.
Yes, thank you. I'm curious if you can sort by multiple MSAs at the same time. Our region has 3.
So this is Kathy again. Hello. Unfortunately, there is no way to use the visualization tool and sort by 3 different MSAs, with the exception of the scatter plot tool, where you can map all of the MSAs and then sort through different questions at a time. Within the download section, there are MSA-level data files where you can download the MSA data yourself week by week and then just select the 3 MSAs that you're interested in. I realize that maybe isn't something that is easiest. Like, the tool is fantastic. They've done a fantastic job. There's a comparison tool as well, actually. Rachel has the screen control. I'm trying to think. I don't know if there's a way. Maybe Tony is moderating. If you can submit your email address or something like that, and we can get back to you. Can our moderator answer? There is this way to do the on the first tab, Rachel, under data. Sure. If you scroll down to that one right there. So if you click the MSA, and then you can select, say, multiple MSAs. And then you can toggle through each question and then see the differences across the MSAs. So other than that, if you wanted something over time, like with all of the weeks of the survey, then you would have to download the data and do your own time series plots for each of the MSAs. I hope did that answer your question?
Kathy, this is Anthony, the facilitator. Just to let you know, the operator will be allowing only for one question because there's about 15 questions, and with no follow-up. If they have follow-up, they can send us an email.
We'll move on. Sorry.
Okay, so just letting you know. No problem.
And our next question comes from Rose Baranda. Your line is now open.
Thank you, Kathy and Rachel. I had a couple of not the question yet. I wondered what will happen after October the 10th. And my question is, the PPP loans not received by a lot of small businesses will affect the annual revenue or during those phases 1 and 2. And I'm also in the rural area in agriculture, a farmer. So my question would be, how many agricultural questions or surveys were returned, and given that response number, doesn't that affect the data that's being presented under agriculture?
Well, those are really good questions. Okay, so I think I got them all, so I hope I get them. So what happens after October 10th? Currently, we are working to figure out a way to continue the survey. Our ability to do so expires. We are approved by the Office of Management and Budget under the Paperwork Reduction Act. We can only conduct the survey through the 31st of October, and then we have to get additional permission granted to continue. So we are working towards that. We believe that the economic fallout from the pandemic continues to affect small businesses, and so we are interested in continuing. So we hope to. In terms of PPP, I think your point is well taken, that the PPP and the revenue components of the survey are related, and they're related to the employment components of the survey as well. I think we do ask businesses to not include PPP. I think there's an FAQ for survey respondents to not include the financial assistance that they get in their revenue numbers, that we are looking for sort of a the impact on the sales or the receipts of the business in our revenue accounting. In terms of rural, I know that we do have this emphasis on MSA level data and not rural data. I hope that as a research exercise in the future, we can produce data for rural versus urban businesses. I know that the rural experience is different. Having lots of family in rural areas. And then last, I would say, as far as industry coverage for agriculture, the Census Bureau does not typically have agriculture in scope. The Department of Agriculture has their own statistical agency, which is called NAS, that does the census of agriculture and other related economic surveys for agricultural businesses. We do have, I believe it's industry in the Small Business Pulse Survey 211, which is like agricultural services that I would direct you to. And it is a very small number of businesses, both that are covered and that we published, that responded to the survey and that we published. So that is industry 211. Related, we have a lot of food manufacturers in our sample, which live downstream from agriculture. So I'm going to close out that question. I hope I've answered it.
And our next question comes from Joan LaGuardia. Your line is now open.
Thank you. Could you please just clarify that for these pulse surveys, you are not surveying any businesses that are outside the top 50 MSAs?
No, that's actually the opposite of true. We are only publishing data for the top 50 MSAs in terms of population size of the MSAs, but we're actually not restricting who we're sampling and surveying based on geography. And so if you are in what we call our target population, that is, you are an employer business with between 1 and 499 employees, and you reported to the economic census in 2017, and you provided an email address, you are going to get the survey. And you have receipts of at least $1,000. So we did not put any geographic limitation. The U.S. territories, including Puerto Rico, are also included in the survey. So.
And if while waiting, if your question has been answered, you can use *2 to withdraw your request. Next, we have Carrie Van Everen. Your line is now open.
My question's been answered, but thank you.
Our next question comes from Shala Charn. Your line is open.
Yes, we showed the links to the survey at a glance, and that wasn't long enough for me to write it down. So are we going to get these links in email or somehow that we can access them?
Sure. I've navigated back to the slide with the links.
Okay. Can I see the page before this? But the only thing I can do is to take a picture of it.
I also believe that this webinar will be publicly posted and recorded.
Okay, so I can get how do I get access to it?
It'll be posted on the Census webinar website, but for now, you can email the Small Business Pulse Survey staff, I believe, at the econ.pulse@census.gov.
And also, if you want to keep your eye on chat to all the participants, the link to where the webinar will be available is the website link is in chat. I also provided the email for the econ.pulse.data@census.gov. It's in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Kevin Raines. Your line is open.
Hi. I was excited to hear it sounds like the microdata will be available for individual responses. And if that's the case, I'm just wondering, do you provide statistical weighting factors to account for differences in response rates?
That's a great question. So unfortunately, the only way the Census Bureau is not able to produce what we call, I guess they're called PUFs. They used to be called PUMs, public use files or public use microdata samples, due to our confidentiality arrangements and the laws that govern our ability to identify businesses in our data. So the only way to have access to the individual responses is to work through what's called the FSRDC system, the Federal Statistical Research Data Center system. And within the FSRDC system, one would have access to the individual records as well as the weights, the survey weights for those.
Our next question comes from Jed Schwartz. Your line is open.
Hi. I'm wondering if your data sample includes only small businesses which have received small business assistance and how much assistance they've received, and also whether you have surveyed the management of any businesses which have gone out of business so far.
So those are great questions. So first I'm going to say that while we partnered with the Small Business Administration to create data for the survey, including the questions around assistance, we do not limit participation by any sort of program participation. So these are strictly businesses that appear in the Census Bureau's economic census that we have had contact with in the past. Oh gosh, and I wrote it down. Oh, out of business. I wrote down your question. I couldn't read my own writing. So then the question is, have we surveyed or interviewed anyone that is out of business? And it's a really interesting question. So if you're out of business, I think it depends on a lot, in some part, like the size of your business and what kind of email address you have. So for sure, we know that if you're out of business and it's a company email address and you're no longer responding to those email addresses or maintaining those mail servers, for instance, then we get emails bounced back and you don't participate. I think for some of the smaller businesses that have gone out of business that maybe use a personal email address or something like a Gmail or a Yahoo or something like that, you know, we have received a fair number of responses. And if you look at the more recent Small Business Pulse Survey data, you can actually see that I think it's around 5%, maybe it's a little less, of the businesses that reported to the survey report that they've actually gone out of business. And then there's another question in the Small Business Pulse Survey that asks if in the future, in the next 6 months, you think you will be going out of business, and that is kind of another 5 or 7% of businesses. And it varies greatly by industry. I think there are certain industries that are more hard hit. So it's an interesting question, and if you use the tool, you can kind of explore that aspect. Thank you.
Our next question comes from Matthew. Your line is now open.
Thank you. My question is, was the term affected operationalized or defined in any way so that respondents could differentiate between, say, affected in that we lost 50% of our revenue and laid off our employees versus we're a restaurant and we had to move all of our tables outside versus we were a retail business that moved online? Was affected defined in any way?
Okay, so no, affected was not defined in any way. Sort of the concept around the first question in the Small Business Pulse Survey, sort of this kind of subjective, how was this business affected by the pandemic, is just one question where people kind of give their overall feeling. One of the things that we hope to do sort of once we close out the survey is to understand the relationship between that subjective assessment by businesses and then sort of more, less subjective, more, for lack of a better word, fact-based questions. You know, did your revenue go up and down? Did your employment go up and down? Did you lay off people? Were you able to move to online sales? Like, we think those sorts of questions and responses may inform people's sort of subjective assessment of the impact or the effect on their business. But no, the very short answer is no, we didn't define it. We did leave that as kind of open-ended subjective question. Thank you.
Our next question comes from Brian Cavetto. Your line is open.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for this wonderful presentation. I just had a question. I believe the response rates at the state level are being posted. Is there any hope or glimmer that MSA level response rates will be posted? I'm working at one of the smaller of the 50, so I'm wondering how many actually responded. Thanks.
Right. So the short answer is I'm gonna give an answer. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think we do have a plan for what we can and cannot release. Sometimes kind of identifying the exact number of businesses in a particular cell in itself is revealing. So unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that. I don't know. Sorry.
And our next question comes from Barbara Peralta. Your line is now open.
Hi. I noticed on your About the Data tab that you mentioned that there are 4 indexes that have been constructed. I'm wondering where to find the information that is given in the 4 different indexes.
Oh, I feel like we have like the hard questions now. We've actually had some problems getting them calculated correctly. We are hoping to release them tomorrow for all 12 weeks of the survey. We're working very hard today to get them approved for release. When they are released, there will be a visualization tool that appears under the time series tool, and they'll also be available in the download section. And they will be available at the state, then the sector level, as well as the national level. I don't know that we're producing them with any more detail. So if they don't come out this week, for sure, they will be out in the next few business days. So thank you.
Our next question comes from Amran Zaman. Your line is open.
Yeah, thank you. My question is that for this survey, was there any question which is sort of comprehends the technology-related issues the small businesses had?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the short answer is no, not really. We didn't focus on technology. We did in the second phase of the survey ask about an increase or a change in the use of online platforms to offer goods or services. But because that's just a really good question, and the short answer is no. The longer answer is sort of. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Martin Gilson. Your line is open.
Oh, thank you. This data set's very exciting. I have a question. I'm out in California. We tend to refer to small businesses as those that have employees with fewer than 100 people. Can you please just kind of speak to how the size segmentation for the small businesses is broken out?
Sure. I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but I can tell you that you said the survey is stratified by business size, and I believe it is from 1 to 4 people, 1 to 4 employees, 5 to 19, and 20 or more. So if you go into the download section, you can look at the data by those size classes, and I believe it is by the employment size classes, and I think it is state and sector data at minimal. I don't know if there's state by sector data. I don't think there is. We start getting into the problems in really small cells, and then we have to suppress so much data that it becomes pointless to release it. But agree, right? Lots of people have different definitions of small business. I think the Small Business Administration typically defines it as fewer than 500, and that's where we went. With the survey, it also allowed us to have a much larger sample and to be able to produce much more detailed data. But if you are interested in what I think of as the very small employer businesses, those with fewer than 5, fewer than 20 employees, that data are available in the download section. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do have a couple more remaining questions. It does not have a recorded name, so please check your mute button, and if you press *1, your line is open now.
Yes, this is Victoria Williams from the Small Business Administration. Sorry, my phone was on mute at the time. Actually, what I wanted to find out was how you were defining small businesses, if it was by revenue or if it was by employee size. And also, do you have non-employers as part of this survey?
Okay. So I sort of touched on that a little bit in the previous question. I'll tell you that we define small business as employer businesses with between 1 and 499 employees and with at least $1,000 in receipts or revenue. So I think I think we do include tax exempt, so nonprofits, .orgs are included. As far as non-employers go, I think the limitations of us including non-employers, which are a really important part of the small business community, we're limited by our ability to send an email. We don't have the same sort of collection mechanism for email addresses for non-employer businesses that we did for employer businesses, which was the economic census. Agree, it is a limitation. Thank you.
And I have one last question in queue. Again, I don't have a recording of their name, but if you're waiting to ask a question, your line is now open.
Hi, I had a question about employment size. So in microdata that will be available, would it be available for more than this current employment size options, or will we be able to rearrange the data to get this 100 and less employees?
Right. So the microdata is only available, I'm going to try to find the link, through the FSRDC system, and that requires going through a research proposal approval process. We do, our data are include in part data from the IRS, and they, as part of that process, review proposals as well. So I'm going to try to put the link up. And so if one had an approved project through the FSRDC system, one could then see the individual response data, which would include the, I think I just posted that link, that would include not just the size class of the establishment, but it would actually have the employment, the reported employment for the establishment. We do not have plans to produce data for any other size classes at this time in public tabulations. Thank you.
And that concludes our questions for this time.
Okay, Rachel, you can do your concluding statements.
Just thank you very much, everyone who attended today, and for your interest in the Small Business Pulse Survey. Again, if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to the Small Business Pulse Survey team at econ.pulse@census.gov, and also to access the data and read more at the links provided on the screen.
Thank you. That does conclude today's conference. Thank you all for participating. You may disconnect your lines at this time.